I will take the name history tried to define me by. The world will hear it, and you will understand it. Jay Silverheels, the first Native American to play a native character on television, made history as Tonto in The Lone Ranger. But the smiling hero audiences loved hid a life of quiet struggle. Behind the camera, he faced inequality, stereotyping, and hardship that few could imagine. In 1957, when asked about his famous role, he answered with only 3 words: "Tonto is stupid." Those words, brief and blunt, carried decades of unspoken frustration. They spoke of a man who had been celebrated on screen while sidelined, underpaid, and constrained by Hollywood's narrow imagination. Jay Silverheels was born Harold J. Smith on May 26, 1912, on the Six Nations Reserve near Hagersville, Ontario. He was one of at least 10 children in a small, cramped household where space was tight and life was defined by necessity. His father, Alexander George Edwin Smith, was a decorated World War I veteran who had been awarded the Military Cross for bravery, but returned home deafened by artillery and haunted by injuries that never truly healed. He survived on a meager pension of $49 a month from the Canadian government, a sum that barely supported a single man, let alone a large family. His war medals could not feed his children, nor did they protect him from constant pain and hardship. Harold watched his father struggle daily with headaches, hearing loss, and the quiet despair of a man diminished by service to his country. Harold's mother, Mabel, carried the weight of the household. Part Mohawk and part Seneca, she managed their small home using every tool at her disposal: traditional medicine, herbal remedies, and relentless determination. Doctors were often unavailable or indifferent to Indigenous families, leaving her to fill the gaps. Whatever the family could not grow, barter, or trade was simply not available. Poverty wrapped itself tightly around their lives, leaving no room for comfort. Harold learned early that survival was about more than strength. It was about resilience, observation, and the ability to push forward when life offered no guarantees. Despite the hardships, Harold's talent and energy could not be contained. By the age of 5, he was racing other children in lacrosse matches on the reserve, showing a speed and agility that would define him for the rest of his life. By the time he was 19, he had turned professional, playing box lacrosse for the Toronto teams under the name Harry Smith. He was not alone in his journey. His brothers and cousins, nicknamed Porky, Beef, and Chubby, traveled with him, creating a tight-knit family network that combined athleticism, ambition, and survival. Together, they moved through cities like Buffalo, Rochester, and Atlantic City, competing relentlessly during the 1930s. Their games were both a source of income and a temporary escape from poverty. Each match a chance to make a name, earn money, and prove themselves in a world that often seemed indifferent to their existence. It was on the lacrosse field that Harold earned the name Silverheels. During one particularly dazzling sprint past a defender, his speed was so pronounced that it seemed as though his shoes flashed silver. Newspapers picked up the nickname, fans flocked to see him play, and his reputation grew. In one season, he averaged more than 4 goals per game, forcing opposing coaches to assign 2 men just to guard him. Athletic success, however, did not translate into freedom from societal restrictions. Harold grew up during a time when Canada's residential schools actively sought to erase Indigenous languages and traditions. Students at Six Nations were punished for speaking Mohawk, sometimes with soap in the mouth or physical beatings. Harold's own sister was sent away and returned unable to speak her native language fluently. Families were torn apart, ceremonies were outlawed, and spiritual practices were punished. Authorities deemed native people lazy, incapable, or unable to compete. Messages that lingered far beyond written reports, shaping public perception and everyday interactions. The Great Depression struck with a force that made poverty unavoidable. Harold's family moved to Buffalo, New York, in search of opportunity, but survival demanded constant labor. Harold worked on farms, took odd jobs, and did whatever it took to keep the family afloat. His father, despite being a war hero, could barely move without pain. His mother bartered family heirlooms just to buy food. Government rations were often spoiled or insufficient, leaving the family hungry and exhausted. Poverty's toll went beyond hunger. It left a sense of invisibility, a feeling that the world might forget or dismiss them entirely. Yet Harold pressed on. His athleticism opened doors. Lacrosse offered opportunities for both income and respect. In 1932, he went professional, earning $75 per game, a significant sum during the Depression. His competitiveness occasionally sparked controversy. In Montreal, a rough foul led to a brawl, and Harold was suspended. Yet even controversy could fuel fame. Ticket sales tripled upon his return. His skill on the field was undeniable, and he became a household name among lacrosse fans. Yet while fame brought recognition, it did not shield him from the broader realities of discrimination or financial insecurity. Boxing offered another outlet. Harold competed as a middleweight in the Golden Gloves tournament at Madison Square Garden, advancing to the semifinals before a brutal punch fractured his jaw in 2 places. Though the injury ended his boxing aspirations, the prize money sustained him through difficult times. He lost nearly 25 pounds on a liquid diet, but refused to give up. This fight became a lesson in endurance, teaching him to absorb pain, adapt, and move forward. It was this combination of skill, resilience, and relentless determination that would later define his transition to Hollywood. In 1937, Harold toured Los Angeles with his lacrosse team. At Gilmore Stadium, while sprinting past players, he caught the attention of comedian Joe E. Brown, who offered him a small film role. The stunt, a diving catch, repeated 11 times to perfection, earned Harold $150, double his lacrosse paycheck. That small opportunity changed everything. He earned a Screen Actors Guild card, adopted the stage name J. Silverheels, and by the end of the year had appeared in 5 films. Hollywood did not welcome him with fanfare. He worked as a stuntman, often earning less than $20 per day, supplementing income by busting tables at night. Yet the seed was planted. Harold Smith had become J. Silverheels, on the cusp of breaking into an industry that had long ignored or misrepresented his people. J. Silverheels' journey into Hollywood was far from glamorous. Early work came in the form of stunt roles, minor uncredited appearances, and background characters that offered little recognition. Studios were indifferent to talent when the actor did not fit the preconceived mold of Hollywood Indian. Casting directors judged his body more than his acting ability, often requiring him to strip to the waist as if he were an exhibit, reducing a complex, talented man to a visual stereotype. Despite the indignities, Jay showed up, learned his lines, or improvised them when the dialogue was painfully stiff, and steadily carved a path into the industry. By 1941, Jay earned his first speaking role after years of uncredited appearances. It was a modest triumph, but one that reflected his persistence and dedication. To improve his craft, he studied Shakespeare. A friend had told him, "If you can read this, you can read anything." Initially skeptical, Jay embraced the challenge. The lessons in timing, enunciation, and stage presence would serve him not only in serious roles, but also in his later work, where he had to inject authenticity into lines written in broken English and often designed to demean or caricature native people. His career, however, was constantly shaped by systemic barriers. Native roles were few, and the ones that existed were often insulting. White actors wearing makeup still dominated lead roles. Jay experienced this firsthand in Broken Arrow, 1950, where he played Geronimo, a pivotal figure in the narrative, but not the protagonist. The lead role went to Jeff Chandler, a white actor from Brooklyn. Jay, a Canadian Mohawk, gave Geronimo dignity and depth, yet the film relegated his contributions to the sidelines. Even in productions attempting to portray Native Americans with some accuracy, Hollywood could not shake its bias toward non-native leads. Real Apache extras were employed in the background, while Jay carried the responsibility of authenticity for the central native character. The contradiction was evident, and Jay understood the tension between representation and recognition. Despite the limitations, Jay's skill and presence on screen did not go unnoticed. In 1949, he landed the role that would define his public image, Tonto, in The Lone Ranger. The television adaptation aired on September 15th, marking a historic moment in entertainment. For decades, Tonto had been voiced on the radio by white actors, including John Todd and Roland Parker. When television producers finally considered casting a native actor, they hesitated, dismissing candidates who resisted speaking in broken or artificial English. Jay beat out 35 other actors to secure the role, breaking the mold of casting non-natives in native roles. His victory was groundbreaking, signaling that talent and authenticity could, finally, triumph over industry prejudice. Even so, the role of Tonto came with its own burdens. The name itself was a constant reminder of imposed stereotypes. Tonto, in Spanish, means fool or stupid. Jay was aware of the weight he carried each time he delivered a line. On the surface, he smiled, played the sidekick, and entertained millions. Privately, however, he resented the limitations, the caricature, and the enforced simplicity of the character's dialogue. In 1957, during a visit to his home reserve in Ontario, someone asked him about his famous role. His reply was brief, pointed, and telling. Tonto is stupid. Those 3 words encapsulated decades of silent frustration. They reflected the tension between public success and private disappointment. A man recognized worldwide, yet constrained by a name and a stereotype. Working on The Lone Ranger was not without practical challenges. The show's modest budget, just $12,500 per episode, meant that Jay and Clayton Moore often lacked basic accommodations. Dressing rooms were absent in the early seasons, forcing the actors to change in a nearby gas station restroom. Filming conditions were grueling. Wool and suede costumes turned into ovens under the sun, and long shoots tested both physical stamina and patience. On more than one occasion, Jay refused to continue until basic conditions improved. His insistence was met with resistance, but eventually, private dressing rooms were provided. This small victory represented more than comfort. It was a demand for respect, a declaration that even in a system designed to belittle him, he would not be ignored. Pay disparity further emphasized the inequities he faced. Despite the show's success and his pivotal role, Jay earned roughly half of what Clayton Moore received. The fame he had achieved came at the cost of recognition and financial equity. Even during a period when the Lone Ranger ranked among the top television shows, Jay remained confined to a sidekick persona, speaking in broken sentences and limited vocabulary. His fluency, intelligence, and sharp wit were invisible to audiences, suppressed by a system more invested in stereotype than authenticity. Jay's approach to the role was strategic. He often ad-libbed lines, using phrasing that reflected how Native people actually spoke, rather than the rigid, unnatural English scripted for Tonto. Directors frequently expressed anger, but Jay understood the power of subtle resistance. Alan Dinhart, a production colleague, recalled how one director, Wilhelm Thiele, nearly attacked Jay on set in 1955, only to be restrained by others. Clayton Moore, understanding Jay's perspective, often intervened, defending his co-star and advocating for the authenticity that Jay brought to the screen. These moments demonstrated Jay's quiet insistence on dignity within a system built to deny it. Even as the Lone Ranger soared in popularity, Jay's life off-screen remained grounded in ordinary struggles. In 1955, he suffered a heart attack during a stunt rehearsal, forcing him to miss 8 weeks of work. The show's writers explained Tonto's absence with a line that reflected societal hierarchy. He had gone to Washington to meet the Great White Father. The line, intended as a simple narrative device, revealed the subtle messages embedded in every aspect of the show. The positioning of Tonto as subordinate and ceremonial rather than central. At home, Jay was Harold Smith, husband to Mary Doma, and father to 6 children from 2 marriages. Family life was complex, balancing love, humor, and the pressures of fame. On television, he was Tonto. At home, he was a father navigating daily life, the legacy of his heritage, and the realities of a career constrained by stereotype. Humor and pride interwove in his personal narrative. He once joked about marrying an Italian woman to get back at Christopher Columbus, calling their children Indelians. Beneath the laughter lay the deeper connection to his Mohawk roots, his grandfather's leadership, and the cultural history that shaped him. Even as he worked steadily in Hollywood, Jay's opportunities were largely limited to roles resembling Tonto. He appeared in supporting parts in War Arrow, 1953, and Drums Across the River, 1954, contributing authentic voices to stories about Native life, but rarely breaking free of marginalization. His athleticism, stamina, and willingness to perform dangerous stunts made him invaluable on set. Yet his range was consistently underutilized. Directors and studios often preferred actors who conformed to Hollywood's narrow vision, leaving Jay to fight for every inch of respect and representation. Even after The Lone Ranger ended in 1957, Jay Silverheels remained tethered to the role of Tonto. Hollywood had given him fame, but it had also confined him. Offers for work were dominated by the same stereotypical Native roles he had portrayed for nearly a decade. Typecasting limited his options, forcing him into supporting characters with few lines and little room for the depth he could bring to any role. Shows like Wagon Train, Rawhide, Daniel Boone, and The Virginian featured him repeatedly, but often as silent observers, warriors, or scouts whose primary purpose was to advance the story of white protagonists. even when he delivered nuanced performances, recognition was scarce. The fame of Tonto was both a door and a trap, opening the world's eyes to his presence while keeping him boxed into narrow caricatures. Financial disparities persisted. While the show paid him roughly $100,000 per season, a substantial sum, equating to around $850,000 today, it was still only half of Clayton Moore's earnings. Pay inequities were not just numbers on a paycheck. They reflected the value Hollywood placed on native talent and the systemic barriers that relegated Jay to secondary status, regardless of his skill or audience impact. These inequities accompanied him through much of his career, shaping both his professional trajectory and personal frustration with the industry. The 1960s brought broader cultural changes. Native rights movements began challenging misrepresentation, highlighting the damaging stereotypes perpetuated by characters like Tonto. Scholars and activists criticized the portrayal of Native Americans in media, comparing Tonto to Indian step-and-fetch-it figures, echoing the derogatory undertones of characters like Uncle Tom in African American communities. Jay found himself at the crossroads of visibility and controversy, celebrated for breaking barriers, yet scrutinized for embodying a role that simultaneously reinforced stereotypes. Rather than retreating, he took deliberate steps toward long-term change, seeking to create opportunities that went beyond protest. In 1966, Jay Silverheels co-founded the Indian Actors Workshop in Los Angeles. The initiative was born out of necessity, designed to address systemic gaps in training and opportunity for Native actors. With the support of notable figures like Buffy St. Marie, Iron Eyes Cody, and Rod Redwing, the workshop offered weekly classes in acting, stunts, voice, and nutrition. Students learned not only the craft of performance, but also the strategies necessary to navigate Hollywood's restrictive structures. The goal was clear: to equip Native actors with the tools to secure Screen Actors Guild membership, access meaningful roles, and reshape how the industry perceived them. The workshop also tackled broader community challenges, including alcohol abuse and elder care, reflecting Jay's holistic vision of empowerment. Among the workshop's students was Michael Horse, who would later portray Tonto in The Legend of the Lone Ranger, 1981, and achieve fame through Twin Peaks. Jay's dedication was not limited to instruction. He believed in unlocking the dormant creativity within Native communities, encouraging actors to tell their own stories, to reclaim their heritage, and to challenge Hollywood from within. While some activists criticized the continued association with Tonto as a symbol of past injustices, Jay remained committed to building tangible change through education and mentorship. He understood that visibility alone was insufficient without the means to control and expand that representation. Jay's personal life during these years was a blend of stability and challenge. He and Mary Doma remained together, raising 4 children, Jay Jr., Marilyn, Pamela, and Karen, while navigating the unpredictable demands of Hollywood. Their marriage was marked by humor and cultural pride, blending Jay's Mohawk heritage with Mary's Italian-American roots. The family settled in Canoga Park, California, finding some measure of domestic peace amid the turbulence of Jay's career. In the 1970s, Jay embarked on a second career in harness racing, earning a provisional driver's license in 1974. He trained and raced horses at Hollywood Park, traveling eastward in 1973 and 1974 to promote events. His athletic background, discipline, and competitive spirit translated naturally to the racetrack. One of his horses, Hi-Ho Silverheels, would later break a track record at Los Alamitos in 1996, a posthumous testament to Jay's enduring influence. Though he could not witness this victory, his family, Mary and Jay Jr., carried forward his legacy, bridging generations through dedication and passion. Jay's later years were marked by health challenges. In 1975, he suffered a series of strokes that left him partially paralyzed, followed by a more severe stroke in 1976 that impaired his speech. Despite these setbacks, his contributions were recognized publicly. On July 17, 1979, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Jay attended the ceremony in a wheelchair, surrounded by native dancers, barely able to speak a few words of thanks. It was a quiet, bittersweet acknowledgement for a man whose life had spoken volumes through action, perseverance, and presence. On March 5, 1980, Jay Silverheels passed away at the age of 67 from complications related to a stroke and pneumonia. His ashes were returned to the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, closing the circle of a life that had begun amid poverty, struggle, and cultural richness. His son, Jay Silverheels Jr., continued the family's engagement with acting, appearing in The Legend of the Lone Ranger in 1981. Though the film struggled with production challenges and failed commercially, Jay Jr.'s participation symbolized a continuation of his father's commitment to visibility, representation, and pride. Jay Silverheels' legacy extends far beyond Tonto. The Indian Actors Workshop nurtured generations of native talent, contributing to the rise of actors like Graham Greene, Oscar-nominated for Dances with Wolves, and filmmakers behind Smoke Signals, the first feature written, directed, and produced by Native Americans. His efforts laid the groundwork for a more authentic and diverse representation of Indigenous peoples in film and television, challenging stereotypes and opening doors that had long been closed. Posthumous honors celebrated his multifaceted contributions. He was inducted into the Western Performers Hall of Fame in 1993 and the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame in 1997 under the name Harry Tonto Smith. Portraits and memorabilia preserve his memory, including his image at Buffalo's Shays Performing Arts Center. Every Indigenous storyteller who seeks to speak, act, or write on their own terms stands on the foundation Jay Silverheels built. Even when Tonto's broken English lines constrained him, Jay found ways to reclaim his voice. On The Tonight Show in 1969, he embraced his most famous role with humor and pride, declaring, "My name is Tonto. I hail from Toronto, and I speak Esperanto." In those words, he reclaimed agency over a character that had once limited him, transforming it into a vehicle for visibility, dignity, and cultural pride. Jay Silverheels' life is a testament to resilience, courage, and the relentless pursuit of authentic representation. A story of a man who turned the constraints of his time into a legacy that still resonates today.